All right, everybody. Thanks for coming. I'm Qasim. Q. Just go with Q. Q's easier. Even though, well, I thought it was easier. I told a Starbucks barista Q, and she wrote Q-U-E-U. And another one wrote Goo. I was like, wow, that's just great. So you're here for medical devices, medical records, and default passwords. I've got some stickers over there I was telling you about earlier. If you want to grab some, feel free to. My business cards are there. If you're not here for this talk, well, it's too late. I run the pen test team in our Atlanta office. I come from healthcare background. I used to work for a medical record company that built medical devices and medical software. And then I moved on to be a HIPAA and high trust assessor. And then I just decided to join the dark side, as if high trust wasn't dark enough already, but I had to go darker. That is my Twitter handle. If you want to hear somebody complain about everything in the world, feel free to follow. And the second one is Cold Labs handle. We release a lot of cool software, some exploits and whatnot. So if you want to stay in the know of that, one of our guys recently released, and it was a very bad timing. He released a CNC framework built on top of Slack. And the bad timing because he released it the day Slack went public with the IPO. So that was not fun. Anyway, I digress. So let's do some homework first. Let's see what we are talking about first, which is your healthcare IT networks. And this diagram kind of depicts a typical IT network you will come across, all right? To the center of everything is the EHR database, all right? That's the database that every device is going to send the data to, or medical records are going to pull data from, all right? Nowadays, that database also includes schedules. When the doctors are in office, what appointments they have with patients, what rooms are available, patient rooms, etc. Then you've got, let me see if this thing works. Laser pointer. All right. So you've got these devices up here, which are your HL7 consumers and transmitters or senders, whatever you want to call it. Your medical devices, right? Your Hillrom beds, smart beds. It used to be that you had a clinician watching you sleep to see your sleep pattern. That got pretty creepy, so now they have devices doing that. So somebody in Russia can watch you now. Then you've got your things like ventilators, your other smart devices, including the smart devices they have in rooms like a display that will tell you which patient is in here, maybe a TV that tells you what medicines you should be taking and what time, along with allowing you to watch movies, TV shows. Then you've got all of these devices sending data through what's called the connectivity engine. Okay? Some of them connect directly to the EHR database. Some connect through a connectivity engine. It's like your gateway. All right? It's the middle person that understands HL7 encoding and sends data with that. We'll talk about some issues with HL7 later. Some of these devices use TCP, raw TCP, HTTP, HTTPS, and whatnot. I've talked about scheduling. I talked about, so these devices or applications will help figure out which room a patient to put in and which doctor to assign them. This also helps the charge nurse understand, which room certain patient is in, if they're having a code blue, what conditions they had beforehand. All of these can then be connected through, you've got your internal networks in here that are hosting maybe a patient portal that could be hosting a software for doctors to remotely work. A lot of doctors or your vendors may be connecting through VPNs or Citrix or whatnot, all right? So that's your typical healthcare network. Now, you see this line over here? It's not solid. There's no segmentation. Majority of the time, there is no segmentation within the hospital network. And I've seen some where it's a hospital and education institution, like university medical centers. There have been times I was doing a pen test against the hospital and ended up hitting the educational servers. the university because there was no segmentation and we weren't notified of that. So a lot of issues there, as we've already realized. So this is an EMR, a very typical one. It's just a picture I picked up from the internet. This is not a real one for sure, but this is what they might look like. There are some big vendors of EMRs like Epic, Cerner. McKesson used to be big. They're not. I don't find them a lot nowadays. NextGen is a big player. eClinical Works is a big player, and there are a few other ones out there. Okay. So that's what our targets look like. What does, what are the goods like? All right. What do we see? So I talked about HL7. HL7 is encoding. All right. It's not encryption. It is not hashing. It's encoding. The benefit of HL7 is the compatibility it creates between different devices and software. The problem with it is it's plain text. You can run a Wireshark capture and you can see the patient data flowing. Okay, so when I used to work at this EMR vendor firm, we had the ability to use SSL TLS. We told our clients about it, but nobody wanted to use it because you did not know how a certain device that's 10 years old in ICU will respond to it. Okay, I've still got a client in New York that has an MS-DOS device. All right, for those of you who don't know what MS-DOS is, I'm glad you're young. Right? So HL7, it helps you man the middle pretty easily. This right here is my favorite. That Muse admin credential has been out since 2007. All right, that's the CVE. Actually, 2015. Sorry, not 7. I've known about it since 2007. But the CVE was out in 2015. It has still not been patched. All right. Problem that happens, I actually did help a hospital change the password for Muse admin and Muse background. It took them 1 year. A lot of these credentials get hard-coded in devices, in software that's been deployed, in scripts that have been deployed. So now people are worried if we change the credential, it's going to take something down. We don't want to kill anyone. Although that's always an excuse that we don't want to kill anyone, so we don't want to use a good password. But in this case, I find that to be a real scenario, a real threat that if we just go ahead and change the password, we don't know what's going to happen. All right. So that's when you end up in a need for inventory, find out which devices are using it, so you can start changing it. All right. Now this has given me the opportunity to get domain admin in 10 minutes. Reason for that is Muse admin and Muse background credentials are Active Directory credentials. All right. They connect to the databases using AD. They connect to servers using AD, devices using AD. They are also local admin credentials on GE Muse servers, which are usually, almost all the time, Windows servers, which are also connected to AD. And guess who sets up those servers? It's help desk, right? So you jump on them using these credentials, and you just dump credentials from memory. Now, most of the time, about 99% of the pen tests I've done, these credentials were also valid with Citrix and VPN. Maybe the devices need to work from home, I don't know. But they were valid through VPN and Citrix also. So 10-minute DA through these. Then you've got a lot of VNC systems. And this is nothing against CareFusion. It's a good software. And a lot of these vendors do publish advisories to let their clients know, don't use these bad practices. We recently found some vulnerabilities with some software in a client environment, and turned out the client just had it misconfigured. Could be the case here too. But VNC, especially unauthenticated VNC, is one of the common ways we get credentials in healthcare environments. Somebody decided to set up VNC to troubleshoot something, to help a nurse, to help a doctor, or to just remotely manage a device and just never turn it off, all right, or never set a password on it. So if they've already logged in with their AD credentials, you can do quite a bit with it. Unauthenticated access to PHI. So you've got credentials stored in plain text files, like Excel files, text files, The top screenshot, black, that was an open NFS share. All right. How many people here know what NFS is? All right. That's a good number. Usually people don't know. I've found this quite common in interviews I do with candidates, and it turns out they don't know what NFS is. This was the case with this client. They were using NFS, they just didn't know what it was. They were monitoring for SMB shares. They were not monitoring for NFS because they didn't know what it was. That was 13 billion patient records. All right? There's not that many humans in the world, so it was just copy of copy of copy of different EMR records into one folder, all flat files. Now, you might say, well, maybe unique ones would be 1 million, but when it comes to the Office of Civil Rights, which enforces HIPAA, that is still 13 billion. All right, so they're gonna impose fines based on that. Okay. Even if it was 1 million, I would sell them for $1 each. Still $1 million, right? I wouldn't do that though. I did have to, one of my guys who found it, I did have to talk to him and have a serious talk with him and said, please do not sell them. You know, it's a lot of money. I went and bought him Starbucks. $4 does it. All right, so plain text patient records, but also plain text passwords. Okay, it is very difficult to use password managers, even for us who are security folks. All right, imagine a clinician loses their LastPass password. That would be chaos for them. It's chaos for me when I lose my LastPass password. But for somebody who is not educated in IT and security and has a high-stress job, it could be quite stressful. So that results in passwords.txt, passwords.xlx. One file I found, it was called sensitive applications, usernames and passwords.txt. So this you find in IT shares, in clinician shares, in user shares, quite a bit. Then you've got the physical goodies. Actual screenshot I wanted to put in there, I couldn't find it. It was this client had their network rack sitting on top of a fridge in a kitchen. All right? And it was not just switches, there were servers in there. All right? I had a client, it was somewhere in far side of Mississippi, a small clinic, and they didn't have an IT person. Their doctor was the IT person. So we asked the doctor, I was a high trust assessor at the time, I was like, hey doc, how do you set up your systems? What's your secure configuration standard? And he goes, I just go to Best Buy and just buy a computer, come in, plug it in. We're good. I make sure I install antivirus on it. It's like, well, he's doing what he's taught to do. He's doing what he understands to be a good thing. When you buy a computer for home, all you do is you go buy from Best Buy, make sure it's up to date, and install AV on it. But he had done the same thing with the EMR, which was now publicly accessible without any passwords on it. This is my favorite. This is a visitor area. That is their main internet connection right there. There's a chair next to it. Okay. And if you want to know the results of all these things and how maybe your records are out there, maybe hospital next to you, their records are breached, OCR breach portal is the place to go. Do this with a glass of wine. I don't drink, but I'm letting you know you should probably if you're going to look at this. All right, so what happens is if you've got a breach of 500 records or more, all right, duplicates also count as individual record. If you've got more than 500 records breached, you have to notify OCR, the Office of Civil Rights, right away. If you do not, if your breach was 499 records or less, you do not notify OCR right away. You wait till the end of the year to submit your report to them, but you do have to notify the patients. So these are all the ones that were 500 records or more. Scary stuff up here. So after all the bad things, what can we do? You guys remember HIPAA, right? I love it when people misspell HIPAA. That's when I was a HIPAA assessor and I was hiring folks for HIPAA assessments. If in their resume they misspelled HIPAA, I knew I was not going to hire this person. All right. So HIPAA it's good. All right, it's something. it actually does tell you to conduct penetration testing if it's reasonable. I'm not a big fan of the words if reasonable, but hospitals know that if you do not conduct pen testing, and if you get breached, you have to now tell OCR why it was reasonable for you to not conduct it. So it's kind of enforcement on the back end, not at the front end, which is not great in my opinion. But there are quite a bit of good controls in it. It is based on NIST. I'll just pause here for a sec.
Spelled wrong.
I know. It's a meme. It's a meme. So then comes high trust. Who here loves high trust? Really? Wow. All right. Well, are you an assessor or are you a consumer?
I'm a PRC consultant, so
Okay.
I have healthcare clients right now trying to get high trust.
All right. Well, make sure you have a lot of coffee.
Yes.
Okay. So high trust takes in all these good frameworks. Well, good in relative sense. Your NIST, FedRAMP, FISMA, PCI, ISO, and it kind of combines them. And it's got different levels of requirements. Okay, if you are a small hospital, you may only have to comply to level 1. If you are a really big hospital, maybe level 3. So it gets more rigorous at each level. Excuse me. Then the requirements are broken into policy, process, implementation. Are you measuring? Are you running some kind of measuring program like your SIM or whatnot? And then are you managing any issues arise? Are you remediating them? So it goes quite technical in that. And you can see that becomes quite a nightmare for the assessor because you have to look at a lot of things. But it does require technical controls like DNSSEC. And then remember HL7? Well, now there's FHIR. FHIR is out there. It is supportive. It supports REST APIs. It can do JSON Web Tokens. It can do SSL TLS pretty well. Now the question is how many vendors are going to start using it? And a lot of vendors are using it, but then again, if your ventilator that costs $5,000 is working just fine, why would you replace it? Okay. If your MS-DOS device that costs $5 million to replace, but it's working just fine, why would you replace it? So that is a conundrum that you get into if you're in healthcare environment. Now, when I'm doing pen tests for ePHI, of course, I look at databases relevant to EMRs, EHRs, after using Muse admin, of course. You can look at webcam shots. I did that once. Well, I used to do it a lot. The last time I did it, never want to do it again. It was, you can end up being in patient rooms. Now, that does show a lot of impact to the board of directors or whatnot. Hey, look, how could you get into webcams in a patient room and do bad things with it? In this case, though, once I did that, the CISO got the board of directors to approve budget for new laptops, and new laptops had no webcams in them. That was his security measure. All right, for physicals, look at printers. A lot of times the clinicians will print something and it will be sitting in the printer for 10 minutes. Or you can look in the secure disposal bins. A lot of times you can just reach in and grab some paper PHI out because it's overflowing and the secure disposal company hasn't picked it up yet. My favorite is at the charge nurse's station, you can find these monitors or computers that give her or him or them the view of all of the rooms, all the patients, what their blood pressure is like, what their name is, what their patient record ID is. All that stuff oftentimes is publicly visible. So there is your PHI, there is your breach. Okay. All right, 4 minutes left. We are hiring if you want to do this fun stuff. If you never want to go back to your doctor because you know all the secrets now, or you can just look at your own records yourself. Thank you. Any questions? By the way, the talk is going to be on GitHub. My GitHub handle is #infosec. All right, I couldn't come up with something better. So, any questions? Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about how, is FHIR inherently going to be secure kind of by default if they're putting it in to replace HL7? Or is it in a situation like HL7 where you'd have to put the SSL on it in place. You know what I mean? Like, I'm thinking we're going to throw fire in, and they're going to be like, oh, everything's great, but it isn't. So
Right.
I'm kind of curious.
It's a protocol,
Yeah.
all right? So first of all, the server and the client need to support it and enforce it. Secondly, all the protections it provides, it supports them. It's not like you're gonna implement Fire and you'll be secure right away. Like I mentioned, it supports JSON. It supports web tokens, right? So it makes it easier to be secure, but then again, you still have to implement it that way. You still have to configure it. Okay? Anybody else? Yes.
You said that some of the admin passwords can take almost like up to a year to change. So ignoring like physical security, what are steps that you suggest like hospitals start taking now?
So monitor. Monitoring is the first thing you should do. Educate your users. Okay? But one of the things I'm seeing is there's a disconnect between IT and application owners and security. Our security folks come in high and mighty and we just want to tell people what to do instead of listening to their problems. Listen to their problems, understand what problems they're having, and work it. Okay? Biggest risk I see in healthcare IT is the IT, application owners, biomed don't understand those security issues. They're set in their way. So helping them understand that would be a good first step. Okay? Yeah.
Do you have more issues with like hospitals and just the bigger environments versus like a specialist that you go to within the area that's nearby, or how does that?
Specialists used to be a bigger issue, but now they're moving towards Office 365. They're moving towards Google Apps. That's cheaper than having an IT guy on site. So they are becoming much more difficult to get into than bigger hospitals. Bigger hospitals they still have to support those old devices. And a lot of times, if you can't get into the bigger hospital, you get into one of their outpatient clinics. And that's how you get a network. Okay? So if you can't get the head of the Hydra, you go for one of the tentacles.
How often are you seeing the third-party remote access in be a major issue versus some of these other ones you've highlighted?
I'm laughing because I have a story. I found this AD domain, Active Directory domain, in an environment where the CISO did not know this existed. The CIO did not know it existed. Nobody in IT knew it existed. It was set up by the EMR vendor to manage their devices and had remote VNC access. All right, and the passwords were, I kid you not, 3 characters, even for DA. But a lot of times, yeah, the remote access exists. When I used to work at the CMR vendor, we had our own very specific passwords that everybody in that company had access to. So it wasn't just the support team has access, everybody had access to it. And then you also had passwords that we just knew that will work, and those are on those black stickers. All right, it's 10:30. I will be outside. Anybody wants to talk more? Anybody wants to hear some terrible stories? But thank you. Thanks, Charleston.